Leona Hale believed she had designed the life she always dreamed of. Beautiful, intentional, clean around the edges. A modern apartment in the heart of Seattle, framed by wide glass windows and touches of warm wood that made even rainy days feel inviting. She had spent years building her career from scratch, starting with student loans and late-night floor plans until Hale & Co. became one of the city's most sought-after boutique interior design firms. And at the center of it all was Darren, her husband, her business partner, her constant. They were a team, or so she believed. Every morning followed the same rhythm. 2 cups of coffee, hers always black, his with too much cream, a quick kiss on the cheek, discussions over breakfast about color palettes and client meetings, and then splitting off for the day, only to reunite at night over wine and the quiet hum of jazz playing from her curated playlist. It wasn't just routine, it was comfort. They had just finalized the design contract for a new eco-luxury hotel chain, a deal that could double their firm's visibility. They were also considering trying for a baby. Leona was hesitant, but Darren had been the one to push for it, bringing it up softly during their long walks around Green Lake, promising that they could make space for something more than just work and deadlines. But it was on a Tuesday night, ordinary in every way, that everything began to unravel. Darren had left his tablet open on the kitchen counter after falling asleep on the couch. Leona was clearing the dishes, humming to herself, her mind already drifting toward emails she hadn't answered. She picked up the tablet out of habit, intending to plug it in for him. Then it lit up in her hands. A message preview blinked at the top of the screen. "Can't stop thinking about last night. Same time tomorrow?" M. Her fingers froze over the screen. M? She stared at it, blinking hard, hoping she had misread it. Darren's tablet wasn't locked. He'd always insisted they had nothing to hide. So she tapped the message, ignoring the heavy thud in her chest. It opened into a thread of late-night texts, soft jokes, suggestive replies, pictures, not of strangers, not flirtatious clients, but of Mara Quinn, Leona's friend, her colleague, the woman who stood beside her at the wedding, adjusting her veil, whispering, "You're so lucky. Darren's obsessed with you." The air in the kitchen turned cold. She stared at the screen, scrolling through message after message, each one carefully worded, every emoji another fracture in her ribcage. Her breath caught, her hands trembled. The images weren't graphic, but they didn't need to be. It wasn't just the betrayal of flesh. It was the betrayal of intimacy, of inside jokes, of names spoken too casually, of times Darren claimed to be working late when he was clearly with her. Mara. Leona placed the tablet back on the counter like it had burned her. The dishes sat in the sink, forgotten. She walked quietly into the bedroom, then turned around and walked right back out. Her legs moved on instinct, but her mind was blank, spinning. She stood on the balcony, barefoot, feeling the cool metal under her skin as the city glittered beneath her. The skyline had never looked more unfamiliar. It wasn't just that he had lied. It was that the life they built, the business, the apartment, the late-night design sessions and whispered promises, suddenly felt staged. Set pieces in a play she didn't realize she was in alone. When she finally returned to the living room, Darren was still asleep. One arm slung over his eyes, mouth slightly open, unbothered. Leona stood there for a long time, staring at the man she thought she knew. The man who held her hand during every investor pitch, who kissed her forehead before she went into client meetings, who promised her forever. And for the first time, she didn't feel angry. She felt nothing, because something deeper than rage had taken its place. It was clarity, not loud, not screaming, but sharp. She didn't wake him. She didn't say a word. But the perfect life she had built with careful hands, it had already begun to collapse. The morning after Leona read the messages, the world looked exactly the same. Darren brewed his usual coffee. The city outside continued its rhythm. Cars honking, people rushing, the usual hum of productivity. But something in Leona had shifted. A quiet detachment now settled behind her eyes. She didn't confront him immediately. She wanted to watch, to be certain. Not because she needed more proof, she had enough, but because she needed to understand who he was when he thought no one was looking. Over the next few days, she became a shadow in her own life, a quiet observer. Darren's movements became suspicious only now that she had reason to notice. His texts became more secretive. His meetings ended later. He smiled at her the same way, but his hugs felt thinner, empty, almost robotic. And Mara still called her, still laughed too loudly on speakerphone, still sent photos of restaurant interiors for inspiration. She used to be Leona's mirror, the friend who always said, "I get you," even when you don't say it out loud. Now, she was just noise. Carefully curated noise. Leona began cross-checking calendars, looking at flight receipts, making polite phone calls to people Darren had supposedly been meeting. The lies revealed themselves not in grand gestures, but in casual inconsistencies. A dinner with a client that didn't exist. A hotel charge on the business card from a weekend Leona had been out of town. The affair wasn't a recent mistake. It had been a year. Mara hadn't just betrayed her as a friend. She had been living a double life, smiling across brunch tables, giving toasts at their anniversary party, and walking into her apartment like it wasn't built on trust. Leona reached her limit on a Sunday evening. Darren came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't his usual. She was waiting, sitting at the dining table with his tablet open. The screen paused on a message that read, "I hate pretending. I wish I could fall asleep next to you every night." Darren looked at the screen, then at her, and didn't even flinch. "So," she said, "how long?" He sighed and placed his keys on the counter, like they were about to talk about taxes. "Leona, don't do this." "How long?" she repeated. He didn't answer. "I already know it's Mara." Silence. Then he shrugged. "A year, give or take." Her breath caught, but she didn't let it show. "You slept beside me every night and looked me in the eye while building a business, while building a life, and the whole time you were lying to my face?" He leaned against the counter, expression unrateable. "You were never really there, Leona. You buried yourself in your career. Everything had to be perfect, controlled, cold. I felt like a placeholder." She stared at him, stunned. "You're blaming me?" He stepped closer. "It wasn't just sex." Mara listened. "She made space for me." "I gave you space," Leona snapped. "I gave you respect. I gave you trust. I gave you a piece of my name, Darren." He raised his voice, not in anger, but frustration. "And I gave you everything I had until I started feeling like I didn't exist. You don't even see people unless they fit into your schedule." Gaslighting. Perfectly measured. She felt it now, the slow twist of guilt he was trying to wrap around her neck. And for a second, she almost let him, almost questioned herself. Until she remembered the nights he didn't come home, the way he'd smiled at Mara when he thought she wasn't looking, the silent parts of their marriage that were never hers to hold. "Then leave," she said. He blinked. "Take her. Take your ego. Take the story you've rewritten. I won't fight you for the pieces you already broke." Darren didn't say another word. He stared at her for a moment, and for the first time, she saw something beneath the surface. Not regret, not guilt, but relief. Like he'd been waiting for permission to leave. He packed 2 bags the next day and left with Mara. No goodbye, no dramatic scene, just the sound of the door closing and the weight of absence settling in like dust. Leona didn't cry. Not right away. She just stood in the center of her carefully curated apartment, staring at the empty space where his coat used to hang, and realized something devastating. She had built her entire life around someone who was only ever passing through. And now that he was gone, she was finally free to start over, but not without breaking first. Leona didn't expect the fallout to come so quickly, or so ruthlessly. Within days of Darren's departure, her world began to unravel, not just emotionally but professionally. Hale & Co., the design firm they had built together from a tiny loft studio into a recognizable name in Seattle, had always been presented as a joint effort. But now, she was discovering just how little of it legally belonged to her. The fine print in their partnership documents, overlooked in moments of blind trust, began to sting. Darren had quietly shifted control over the last year, assigning new projects under a revised company name, routing client communications through his private channels, and rewriting ownership rights behind closed doors. And Mara, ever strategic, had assumed control of Leona's design portfolios, rebranding them as collaborative works and weaving herself into the narrative as co-visionary. Leona's inbox grew cold. Clients stopped calling. Invitations to events she once hosted now arrived with other names at the top. Some of her friends, mutual acquaintances with Darren, stopped responding to her texts, quietly choosing their allegiance. Others offered vague sympathy, but stepped back, afraid to be caught in the storm. She tried to fight. At first, through attorneys, through phone calls, through calmly worded demands. But every time she pushed back, the walls closed in tighter. A whisper campaign spread through the industry. Nothing blatant, nothing actionable, just enough doubt to make sponsors reconsider. She's not as involved in her firm as she seems. Darren handled most of the operations. She's too emotional for big projects. It was a slow erosion, but Leona could feel it happening, like water under the foundation. She lasted 3 weeks in the city. 3 weeks of plastered smiles, fake confidence, and watching Mara appear in photo shoots next to Darren, holding samples of Leona's original concepts with her name cropped out. Then, one rainy afternoon, she packed a single bag and drove north without telling anyone. The lakeside cabin had belonged to her mother, an artist who had died too young and too quietly. The cabin was old, dusty, filled with the smell of cedar and thyme. But it was untouched by Darren, by Mara, by betrayal. No one had changed anything here. Leona lit the fireplace, curled into the same couch where she used to watch her mother sketch in the mornings, and let herself collapse. Not with screams or tears, but with silence. A slow descent into exhaustion that sleep could never fully mend. The first days passed like fog. She didn't check her phone. She didn't respond to emails. She stared at the ceiling for hours, letting the pain settle into her bones. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a theft of identity, of years of work, of trust, of narrative. Her entire life had been rewritten without her consent. But pain, when it has nowhere left to go, transforms. And in the stillness, rage began to take its place. Not the explosive kind, not the reckless fire that burns down everything in its path, but the cold, focused kind. The kind that builds. She began walking the lake trail each morning. Slowly at first, then faster. She brought her sketch pad with her again, the one she hadn't touched since the split, and began drawing, not for clients, not for investors, but for herself. She sketched homes for women starting over, libraries built into attics, community centers with safe corners and soft light. Ideas returned, not as assignments, but as purpose. By the end of the second week, she sat on the porch one evening and whispered to herself, They took everything I built, so I'll build something they can't touch. The collapse wasn't the end, it was the clearing. And from that clearing she would rise, not to get them back, but to take back herself. The name on the studio window was simple, Leona Gray Designs. No bold fonts, no flashing signs, just clean lettering on old glass in a tucked-away corner of Seattle's Arts District. It sat between a used bookstore and a florist that only sold wildflowers, the kind that grew sideways and out of order. Fitting, Leona thought. She felt like one of them. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms. One was a work table littered with fabric swatches, pencil-shaved sketches, and mugs that never made it back to the sink. The other, a narrow reception space with cracked white walls and a vintage couch she'd reupholstered herself. No receptionist, no assistants, just her and a little speaker playing soft piano through the afternoon. She opened quietly. No press release, no announcement. The scandal that once clouded her name still lingered like smoke. Clients lost, colleagues distant, her reputation hung in limbo. But she was no longer interested in reclaiming the pedestal they had once placed her on. She wanted to rebuild, not to be seen again, but to finally see herself. The first clients came slowly, a widowed woman named Jean who wanted to turn her late husband's music room into a quiet reading space for her grandkids. A single mother of 3 who had just moved into her first apartment after escaping a decade-long abusive marriage and needed to make it feel like home. A young trans man who wanted to transform his bedroom into something that reflected who he was now, not who he used to be. They didn't care about headlines. They didn't need status. They needed beauty that didn't lie, spaces that listened, and that's what Leona gave them. Her style changed, less polished, more personal. She used reclaimed wood, imperfect textures, hand-drawn stencils instead of printed wallpaper. Each project had fingerprints, scars, stories. The work wasn't fast, and the pay was modest, but the word began to spread, not among the elite, but among the overlooked. She became known as the designer for the unheard. And with every home she touched, a piece of herself returned. Clients cried in front of her. Some hugged her after walkthroughs. Others sent her handwritten notes and photos of kids playing on rugs she had chosen. It wasn't glory, but it was real. Meanwhile, across town, Darren and Mara were glowing in the spotlight. Their version of Hale & Co. bloomed in all the wrong ways. Lavish parties, sleek advertising, and a social media presence that looked like a magazine cover. They wore matching outfits at launch events, giving statements about elevating modern design with a collaborative edge. They smiled too much. Everything was rehearsed, but behind the glamour, things were shaky. Deadlines were missed. Contractors complained of poor communication. Designs lacked warmth. Too corporate, too sterile. Clients began noticing that something was missing, something human. But Leona didn't watch from afar. She didn't track their downfall like a scoreboard. She was too busy creating beauty out of broken places, too busy sketching late at night, chasing new visions, and drinking tea from the chipped mug her mother once loved. One afternoon, while walking out of a client's home in the South End, Leona overheard a conversation between 2 women on the street. "Who did your place?" "A woman named Leona Gray. You wouldn't believe what she did with just 1 window and a chair." They didn't know she was there, but she smiled all the way back to her car. She had nothing left from her past. No husband, no company, no name in lights. But what she was building now was stronger than all of it. Not a brand, not a comeback, but a foundation made from ashes and born from fire. It was raining the day Elliot Raines walked back into Leona's life. Though, to be fair, it always seemed to be raining in Seattle. The door to her studio creaked as it opened, letting in a gust of wind and the scent of wet pavement. Leona was crouched over the edge of her work table, adjusting mood boards for a small clinic waiting room project, when she heard it, the soft chime of the bell above the door. "Sorry, is this still the bookstore?" A voice asked. Leona looked up. His face was older, the lines sharper than she remembered, but the eyes were the same. Deep set, calm, with a trace of mischief hiding just beneath the surface. Her breath caught. "Elliot?" she said, almost unsure it was real. He paused, blinking, and then the faintest smile spread across his face. "Leona Gray. Well, Leona Hale, once upon a time." She stood slowly, brushing sawdust from her palms, heart pounding. "What are you doing here?" she asked, half laughing. "I was visiting a site down the street," he said, still smiling. "Turned the wrong corner, and then I saw your name on the glass. I thought it couldn't be that Leona." She offered him tea, mostly to buy time for her thoughts to settle. The kettle steamed while he wandered the small studio, running his fingers lightly along the edge of the shelves, eyes scanning the sketches pinned to the corkboard. "I like your work," he said simply. "It feels like people live in it." Leona stirred the tea and handed him a mug, careful not to let their fingers touch. "That's the point. I got tired of making spaces just for people to show off in." He nodded, understanding more than she expected. "Same. That's why I left New York. I was designing glass boxes for billionaires who didn't even live in them." They sat, and time began to rewind in the smallest of ways. She remembered how they used to sketch houses in the back of notebooks as teenagers. How he once told her he'd build her a house made entirely of windows so she could watch the world but still stay safe. He was her first almost love. Right before college took them in different directions. Elliot had been in Europe for the last 8 years. Berlin, Copenhagen, and Barcelona, working on sustainable design and winning low-key awards that never made headlines, but deeply shaped communities. Now, he was back in Seattle, looking for projects that meant something. "Have you heard of the Beacon Hill Renewal Project?" he asked. Leona nodded. "The old rec center renovation? I just got the contract to lead the architecture. It's tight budget, slow timeline, and no real money, but it's got heart. I need someone for the interior work." She tilted her head. "And you came to me?" He met her gaze. "I saw what you did with that domestic violence shelter on 5th. You made it feel like safety. That's what this project needs." Leona hesitated. Every fiber in her body told her to be cautious. She had only just started regaining control over her own space, her own name. Opening that door to someone, especially someone who once held a piece of her heart, felt risky. But there was something about Elliot, not just familiarity, but stillness. He didn't rush her, didn't oversell himself, didn't demand trust. He just offered it. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Take your time," he replied. "But I hope you say yes, not because we have history, but because I think we could build something good." He stood, finished his tea, and gently placed the empty cup next to her pencils. Before he walked out, he turned once more. "You're stronger now, Leona. Not louder, just clearer." After he left, the studio felt a little fuller. Not with chaos, but with something quiet, possible. She looked down at her sketches, then at the rain tracing lines on the window. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was timing. Maybe healing was never about being alone. Maybe, just maybe, it was about building again, with someone who knew how to stay. The first time Leona saw her name back in print, it was in the corner of a 2-page spread in Modern Habitat, tucked beneath a photo of a sun-drenched reading nook she had designed for a retired school teacher. It wasn't a cover. It wasn't glossy or loud, but it was there. designed by Leona Gray, and people noticed. Emails started coming in, not in floods, but steadily. Requests for consultations, invites to speak on panels. A feature in a podcast about ethical design. What made Leona different wasn't just her eye for beauty. It was that her designs breathed. They told the stories of the people who lived in them, survivors, healers, starters over. No one could fake that kind of authenticity, and that authenticity was louder than any scandal. Her studio grew, not with flash, but with soul. She brought on a part-time assistant, Leah, a single mom with a background in textile work who had been overlooked by everyone else. Then a junior designer, then an intern from a local arts program. Her team was small, diverse, and fiercely loyal. They called her Lee, and sometimes forgot she was their boss. Meanwhile, the version of Hale & Co. that Darren and Mara were steering continued to unravel. What began as whispers about mismanagement soon turned into public complaints. Vendors posted on social media about unpaid invoices. Former employees spoke anonymously to design blogs about toxic work culture and performative values. Clients pulled out of contracts after delays, stretched into months, and promises turned hollow. The cracks they tried to hide beneath marble and veneer could no longer hold. Leona didn't watch it happen, not actively. She had removed every trace of their names from her feeds, her contacts, her mind. But sometimes, people sent her links. Did you see this? You dodged a bullet. They're crashing. She never replied. One day, an email arrived with Darren's name in the subject line. It was short. Open quote, Leona, we need to talk. Maybe we could find a way to rebuild something. I know I made mistakes, but you and I made a strong team once. And you know how hard this industry can be alone. Let's talk, D, close quote. She stared at it for less than 5 seconds before deleting it. A week later, a text came from a number she hadn't blocked but had never replied to. Open quote, you're doing great. The magazines are saying your work is transformational. I'm proud of you. You always were the star between us. Can we talk? Just one coffee? Close quote. She didn't answer, because she had learned that not all ruins were worth returning to. Instead, she poured her energy into the Beacon Hill Community Center project with Elliot. The site was noisy and messy, but it had heartbeat. The walls went up slowly, then the paint, then the reclaimed wood details. Her hands were in everything, and so were Elliot's. They worked side by side most days. Quietly, easily. No pressure, no definitions, just a rhythm. Sometimes they shared lunch in the back garden and talked about everything except the past. Sometimes they didn't talk at all. One day, while laying out samples for the center's main room, Elliot looked up and said, "You know, there's something beautiful about watching something rot. It makes space for new roots." She smiled. "I used to think it meant failure." "It doesn't," he said. "It means nature has a better plan than we did." Leona didn't speak, but she understood. Darren and Mara had tried to build an empire from borrowed blueprints, from performance and manipulation. And now they were watching it collapse, brick by brick, because they never cared for the foundation. Leona, on the other hand, had built hers slowly, quietly, from pain, patience, and truth. And this time, no one could take it from her. Not again, not ever. A former project manager from Hale & Co., someone Leona barely remembered meeting at a holiday party 2 years ago, anonymously leaked files to a mid-level business journalist named Camille Lynn. It wasn't revenge. It was disgust. He had witnessed too many contracts signed under false pretenses, too many ideas lifted from freelancers and passed off as Mara's own. He had watched Darren nod through meetings while privately mocking clients, manipulating numbers, and using Leona's archived sketches, altered just enough to pass legal eyes, as selling points for high-paying design pitches. Camille, quiet but thorough, started digging. She reached out to former employees, vendors, and partners. One by one, the truths began surfacing. Emails, memos, internal documents. Then came the article. Glass Walls, the cracks behind the design empire of Hale & Co. It was published on a rainy Thursday morning. By noon, it was trending on Twitter. Camille had reached out to Leona 2 weeks earlier, requesting an interview. Not for scandal, but for perspective. "I'm not interested in a takedown piece," she said. "I want the truth, from your voice if you're willing." Leona thought about it for 2 days. Then she agreed, but under conditions. No dramatic quotes, no emotional manipulation, just facts. She spoke clearly, concisely. She explained how designs she had created had shown up under a different name months after her departure. She pointed to emails, timelines. She never raised her voice. She didn't describe betrayal. She didn't mention the affair. Instead, she said, "When you build something with someone and they take your hands off it and call it theirs, the building always remembers, eventually it leans, and then it falls." The article went live with screenshots, with side-by-side design comparisons, with timeline breakdowns and client testimonies, and the collapse began. By that weekend, Hale & Co. had lost 3 of its biggest contracts. 2 of its interior designers resigned. A major corporate sponsor released a statement distancing itself from the firm. Clients began requesting refunds. One by one, the glossy veneer peeled off. Darren tried to go silent, but the pressure mounted. Mara, cornered in a podcast interview, snapped when asked about the article. Her defensiveness became a meme within hours. Leona watched none of it. She didn't need to. The messages poured in on their own. "You were right all along. I wish we had listened. Do you want to speak at our Ethics and Design Summit next month?" She answered only the last one with a yes. What surprised her most wasn't the public response, but her own lack of satisfaction. There was no vindictive thrill, no private toast, no whispered "I told you so" to Elliot as they walked through the nearly finished Beacon Hill Center. She just felt done. Finished with the version of herself that needed to win. Finished with the idea that exposure was the only kind of justice. Because the truth had done the work, and now all that was left for her to do was build. The rain had been falling for hours, soft and persistent, blanketing the streets of Seattle in a sheen of silver. Leona was alone in the studio, finalizing the finishing touches for a low-income housing project on her laptop, the soft hum of jazz playing from the corner speaker. The warm lamplight made the space feel like home now, not just a place she worked, but a place she belonged. She was folding up her sketch pad when the door creaked open. At first, she thought it was Elliot. He often stopped by in the evenings, sometimes to drop off plans, sometimes to bring her coffee and quiet company. But when she looked up, her body went still. Darren stood there, soaked and unshaven, his eyes dark and rimmed with exhaustion. His once immaculate coat was wrinkled and damp. He looked smaller, not physically, but in presence, like someone who no longer knew how to fill the space he used to dominate so easily. She said nothing, just stared. He stepped in slowly, his hands visible, like he was approaching a stranger's home. "Leona?" he said, his voice low. "Can I talk to you?" Her first instinct was to say no, but something in her, perhaps the calm she'd fought so hard to rebuild, made her stay silent. She stepped back, letting him in. He stood in the center of the room, turning slowly as if seeing it for the first time. "This is yours?" he asked, motioning to the walls, the plans, the mood boards. She nodded. "Every inch. It's beautiful." "I didn't build it to be," she replied. "I built it to be true." Darren looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment his facade cracked. The carefully constructed charm, the practiced humility, it fell away. "I messed up," he said. Leona crossed her arms but didn't speak. "I was lost. After everything with the firm, with you, I didn't know what I was doing. Mara, she told me what I wanted to hear. She made me believe I was still in control." She raised an eyebrow. "And now that you've lost it all, you're hoping I'll help you fix it?" He flinched. "No, yes. I need your help, Leona. No one returns my calls. No one trusts me anymore. But you're still respected. You have credibility. If you said you forgave me, if you came back even just for a statement, it might change things." Her face hardened. The audacity still surprised her. "You're asking me to lend you the name you stole from me," she said. "You want my reputation to clean your mess." He stepped closer, desperation rising. "I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could handle it all. I thought I could have both." "And what exactly did you think I was?" she asked softly. "A safety net? A brand partner? A backup plan?" He swallowed hard. "I thought you'd still be there." Silence stretched between them like a tight wire. Leona exhaled, her voice firm but quiet. "You didn't just cheat on me, Darren. You didn't just lie. You gambled me away. You used everything I gave you, my designs, my trust, my name, and when it benefited you more to walk away, you did. You folded your hand and bet it all on someone else." "I was scared," he whispered. "So was I," she said. "But I didn't destroy anyone to feel less alone." Darren looked at her then, with a helplessness she once would have mistaken for vulnerability. Now it looked like weightless regret. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. She nodded. "I believe you, but that doesn't mean you get anything back." He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, she walked to the door and held it open. The message was clear. He hesitated. For a second, it looked like he might say something else. But then, with shoulders slumped and hope fading from his eyes, he walked out into the rain. She watched him disappear into the night. This man who once held her whole life in his hands. She closed the door behind him, locked it, and turned off the light. The days slipped by softly now, like pages turning themselves. Leona no longer measured her time in deadlines or damage control. Instead, she moved to the rhythm of her own breath. Slow, steady, deliberate. There were still deadlines, of course, and clients and deliveries and designs to finish. But now there was also coffee that stayed warm long enough to be finished, music that played without interruption, and quiet mornings shared with someone who asked for nothing more than to be beside her. Elliot had never needed to be the center of the room. He arrived early, stayed late, and carried silence like a gift. He didn't fill space, he made room. And in that room, Leona had started to grow. They never talked about what they were. There were no titles, no declarations under stars. They shared breakfasts in the studio kitchenette and scribbled notes in each other's sketchbooks. Sometimes, he left wildflowers in her mug. She didn't ask where he got them, and he never said. It became their quiet ritual. One day, violets. Another, daisies. Once, a single crooked sunflower that leaned too far to one side. She left it there for a week. When they worked together at the Beacon Hill Community Center, their synergy was seamless. He focused on light and structure. She focused on comfort and meaning. Their visions blended, not perfectly, but like watercolors bleeding into one another. Messy, soft, real. One afternoon, while installing handcrafted window seats for the reading room, Elliot said, almost absently, "You smile more when you're not looking." Leona turned to him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, hammer in hand. "When you're not watching yourself, when you're just being." She didn't respond right away. But later in the mirror, she caught a glimpse of it, a softness in her eyes she hadn't seen in years. Not the polished, forced smile of a woman protecting herself, but the quiet curve of someone finally at ease. One evening, they sat on the rooftop of the Finnish center, watching the sun melt behind the city skyline. Leona pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped in a borrowed flannel jacket. Elliot sat beside her, sketching trees that leaned into the wind. "I used to think love always came with a cost," she said, not looking at him. "That to be close to someone meant giving them pieces of yourself they might never return." He set the pencil down. "It doesn't have to." She looked at him. "Then what does it mean?" He thought for a moment. "It means staying when there's nothing to prove, giving without keeping score, making space, not demands." She leaned her head on his shoulder, surprised by how natural it felt. "I'm not ready for everything," she whispered. "I'm not asking for everything," he replied. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't ache. She had been loved before, or at least she thought she had. But that love had come with expectations, conditions, knives hidden behind smiles. This was love that didn't hurt. It didn't announce itself. It didn't shout or demand or burn. It glowed, like sunlight through broken glass, soft, warm, and healing. And for the first time, Leona realized she didn't need to be rescued. She just needed someone who didn't flinch at the cracks. The stage lights were warm on her face, softer than she'd imagined, casting a gentle glow over the crowded auditorium. Leona stood behind the podium at the National Design and Sustainability Summit, her notes untouched, her voice steady. A large screen behind her displayed one of her most recent projects, a transitional shelter for women and children, filled with sunlight and soft corners, not walls that closed in, but spaces that opened up. She had been invited not just as a designer, but as a story. They wanted her for her portfolio, yes, but also for her resilience, the woman who had lost everything and built again from nothing. The woman whose work now graced magazines not because of trend, but because it touched something true in people. She began her talk with no drama, no bitterness. "I used to believe design was about control. Perfect lines, balanced symmetry, clean surfaces. But real design, like real life, is rarely that polished. It's built on story, on layers, on the things we carry into a space when no one's watching." She paused, letting the silence settle around her. "There was a time when I lost more than a company," she continued. "I lost my voice, my name, my sense of worth. But in that silence, I learned something no textbook ever taught me. When someone tries to erase you, build again. Not to prove anything, but because you still deserve to exist beautifully." There were no tears in her eyes, no tremble in her hands. She finished with a quiet nod and stepped away. The applause didn't thunder, it rose. A slow, gathering sound of people standing, moved not by pity, but by truth. The kind that doesn't scream for attention but lingers after the room empties. Somewhere in a dark, cluttered apartment on the other side of the country, Darren watched her on a flickering TV screen. He hadn't planned to. He was scrolling aimlessly, waiting for a food delivery, when her name caught his eye. He hadn't heard it in months. Mara had left not long after the company folded. No goodbyes, just a missing suitcase and a silence he couldn't fill. He sat back in a stained chair, beer bottle loose in his hand, watching the woman who used to wait for him at dinner tables, who used to design his dreams, who used to ask for nothing but honesty. She didn't look back at the camera. She didn't mention names. She didn't need to. Back at the summit, Leona stepped off stage and walked alone through the backstage hallway. Her heels echoed softly on the concrete floor. She pulled out her phone, not to check emails or headlines, but to open a quiet message from Elliot. Proud of you. Coming home soon?" She smiled, not because she had won, but because she no longer needed to. Outside the venue, the evening air was crisp. She stood beneath a banner with her name on it, wine tugging at the corners. For a moment, she closed her eyes, breathed deep, and whispered, "He cheated, lied, and left. So I didn't just survive, I rose." And this time it wasn't a declaration, it was the truth.